its
introduce
eyes off
the viewers
China.
to the shots that are on our television screens. Prime Minister Narendra Modi having his third bilateral for the day, this time with the Vietnamese delegation. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so
Ambassador, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I was saying is, as far as the Quad is concerned, if the meeting had not taken place, it would have sent out a wrong message to the countries in the region, those who are, looking forward to much stronger and much more proactive engagement of the United States as far as the region is concerned. And both Russia and China have been pushing back against the whole idea and concept of Quad. So I'm very happy that this is taking place. It will take forward the discussions that took place in Tokyo last year. In fact, in May, when the second Quad summit took place, the first having taken place in September in Washington, D.C. So this has become an annual feature, and that I'm very happy about it. And the last point would, of course, be in terms of the bilateral on the sidelines between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden. Although we know that the state visit is going to take place on 22nd June to Washington, D.C. But here also, I think, taking the relationship forward and sending out a message that it is in fine fettle and strong dynamic moving forward, notwithstanding all the challenges that the world is facing, and some of them tend to get rubbed off on the bilateral relationship, particularly
Sajjanhar,
as far
that point that has been made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in that bilateral that took place between him and Prime Minister Kishida was about synergies between G7 and G20. Dr. Rao, why do you think that synergy is needed? Is it because G20 is far more representative than G7?
Oh, yes, absolutely, Maria. Before we went into the break, I was perhaps contemplating, and I was telling you about how important it is for any of the global financial or economic or food related, for example, energy related infrastructure to be successful only under the condition that the G20, the global South is on board. And like I was telling you that there are certain problems, certain issues that come when you talk about the global North and the global South. And I was telling you about the approach, the difference in approach with respect to climate, with respect to, phasing out versus phasing down coal, with respect to how they look at, the health, the COVID vaccine production with respect to the TRIPS waiver, and how the, some of the European countries and other countries are not on the same page when it comes to removing those, barriers, etc. So for all of that, you need the G20, which is more representative of the world today. Even G20 is not perfectly representative, but G20 is far more representative than the G7, definitely by definition, because here in G7 you have only the advanced economy.
Small grouping of 7. But the point here is, Dr. Rao, also in the context of how the world has changed, how the roles of various countries have changed in the post-COVID world, where India, because of its stable economic situation, is being seen as a bright spot. The spotlight is on India, and that is the reason why when we look at that confidence with which Indians are seen abroad, the anticipation, curiosity around the India story is so much there. That is the time in which India is also holding the presidency of G20. Do you think because of the changed situation, particularly post-COVID, India's role becomes important, and that is why Prime Minister Narendra Modi's bilaterals, be it with the Vietnamese or with the South Koreans, each and every meeting will be about more takeaways. I mean, what these countries get from India than what, in terms of how they benefit more than we benefiting from it.
Maria, I would look at it in terms of, just to put my point across in a more succinct manner, I would say that, let's look at it in terms of a macro, layer, macro plane, and then in terms of something which is more granular with some more, micro. At the macro level, definitely what the COVID-19 pandemic and the way the world was, suffering from it, all the things that the world did to come out, to recover from the shocks that we saw because of COVID-19. What basically I think the key takeaways was that we genuinely need to work towards collective, good and collective action, because no matter how the key, or specific national interests could vary over the profile of different countries that we're talking about, but definitely there is a lot of merit that lies in collective action, and there are certain things like the global commons, like for example the COVID-19, etc., or something like a war or the after effects of a war that cannot be tackled by one country alone. Okay, and that is where you see that this collective action, and countries who call for collective action, who work for constantly to arrive at that common minimum, becomes so relevant. The second macro that I would discuss here is that there has been discontentment with how the multilateral frameworks have not worked, have not delivered. And here I'm definitely referring to the UN.
Yes.
You also mentioned when you started out the discussion that, there is a lot of discontentment about how the United Nations and its different organs have not been able to deliver, have not really been able to stand up to the occasion. Now, can India reverse this discontentment with multilateralism? And, one of the things that India has done, I would say rather smartly, I wouldn't say it's perfectly done because there is no perfection, but with something which is done rather smartly is that India has tried to straddle, very different engagements from different countries in the world that are at loggerheads when we are parallelly, holding the presidency of a G20 and the presidency of an SCO, and also heading the United Nations Security Council when our term comes, and then again, we are invited at G7 and we are there at every single important world forum. So there is a genuine, I would say, expectation from India to reverse this discontentment with multilateralism. And India's answer has always been about, focusing on the transformative world order. So, the world order is changing. I mean, none of the institutions, if they change along the way, would make sense or would be able to solve the world problems if they do not recognize the fact that the world order is changing. So that's the macro. At the micro level, the bilaterals become very, very important. Also at a sub-micro level, which is, Ambassador Sajjanhar already mentioned, this entire plurilateral grouping. So, India is engaging at the macro level, at the macro level, which is, with the plurilaterals, the trilaterals, very important ones, and the bilateral. And therein, we need to talk about more specific issues